and shalom, everyone, and thank you for joining us for another episode of Crossing Boundaries. My name is Kim, streaming to you live from Tel Aviv, Israel, and together with me is one of our co-founders at Mentity Tours, Aziz Abu Sarah. Hi, Aziz.
Hi, Kim. How are you?
Good. I stopped saying amazing because you don't like that word anymore. So what do you want to be today? Awesome?
Sure.
Do you...
word or an Arabic word instead, like nifla.
Akhla.
Sounds
I think akhla will solve it because then it's not, it's both.
Yeah, sounds good. Sounds good. Well, I'm excited about today because again, we keep bringing friends, people who we admire, and this in this conversation, and so I'm looking forward to having this conversation, talking to Gidon and Nada, and EcoPeace, which is an organization that's doing just unbelievably amazing work in Israel and Palestine and in Jordan. But I think the ripple effect of what they do goes through the whole region, and being able to bring I think of an organization that understands the concept of interdisciplinary approach. It's not just environmental, it's not just a peace organization, it's bringing all these different segments together and understanding that you cannot really separate those things from each other. And so I'm looking forward to having this conversation, and maybe Gidon, we were saying it's been a while I haven't seen you, so it's good to see you and being able to have this conversation. But maybe you can explain to us in your own words, so what is EcoPeace? What's the purpose of EcoPeace? Why was it created?
So Aziz and Kim, it's really a wonderful opportunity for Nada and myself to be with you and to tell our story. EcoPeace is almost 26 years old. A little bit like you, Aziz, coming from, no, you're older than 26, but the story of EcoPeace is a little bit like you in, coming out with a good idea from university, and then implementing it on the ground. And sort of that's a little bit of my story of EcoPeace as well, where in my master's at law school in the United States in 1993, 94, I simply asked the question, is peace going to be good for the environment? Because of course at that time, we were all certain that peace had broken out. And the question in my mind, well, great, we're establishing peace between different peoples, but will the result be a better, cleaner, more sustainable environment, or will it lead to overdevelopment and further destruction? And therefore, EcoPeace was established to try to put environmental issues onto the peace agenda. But as we all know, quite sadly, peace didn't break out, and very quickly everything really started to tear apart and fall apart. And then EcoPeace, quite quickly had to reinvent itself from an organization of Palestinians, Jordanians, at that time also Egyptians, together with Israelis. We had to ask ourselves, are we still relevant, given that overdevelopment was certainly no longer going to be taking place? And we came to see that in fact, the type of relationships we've developed, the common concern that we shared over our shared environment was a really strong basis to build trust, to highlight to communities, to decision makers that we're in the same boat, that the political borders that we're all claiming and fighting over, and the land that we claim to so much love, we're heavily polluting, we're destroying. And that perhaps if we come to understand that one, the political borders are not the only borders that count. Our watersheds are perhaps even more important, and our watersheds don't recognize any of those borders, those streams that carry sewage cross borders, or communities that in the same watershed don't have water while the neighbor has 24/7 water supply. These we felt were critical issues that if people could understand, they could perhaps come together and try to overcome. And in that process of understanding my water reality and my neighbor's water reality, we've come to see that people understand that working with the other is not doing a favor. Working with the other is an absolute necessity for the health and welfare of my own community.
And you're talking about the communities understanding this. Can you talk a little bit about the projects that you're running today that are helping the communities, the local communities, to understand these goals? Nada, maybe we can go to you.
Yes, definitely our flagship program is the Good Water Neighbors, and this flagship program has evolved throughout the years. It's been running through the EcoPeace programming since over a decade, and it keeps evolving. It started with more focus on a community-based work, where we actually engage communities that live on shared watersheds, and basically either Palestinian, Israeli, Jordanian, or Jordanian Palestinian. And we focused on very much on raising awareness to the shared environmental problems and amplifying the voices of these communities to find solutions on a national level with a transboundary dimension and impact, where also these solutions are suggested and being advocated for with the governments, respectively, through our 3 offices, and with international community to attract funding. We have succeeded in doing that a lot, and we have done the bottom-up strategy, top-down strategy for so long that we've came to understand the changing dynamics, the changing atmosphere and environment, political changes. It enabled us to also be very flexible in terms of our ability to adjust our programming. So at the moment, our Good Water Neighbors program has shifted towards a more nationwide target in our 3 countries. Of course, still speaking about transboundary issues, but also with a great focus on climate change impact, adaptation and mitigation through several layers. So we have the educational layer, which at which we build our youth cadre and our teachers base, at which we can also scale up our environmental educational material, which we've also developed in-house. We also have the young professionals group, at which we focus on water diplomacy, green social entrepreneurship, and this is also a new thing that is being embedded now in the EcoPeace programming, is to focus on startups, innovation in sectors that are related to water, sanitation, green energy, agricultural technology, etc. And then we have also a layer which focuses on promoting investments in the Jordan Valley. This is, of course, part of our larger vision to the Jordan Valley Sustainable Development that stems from our regional master plan for the 3 countries, focusing, of course, on the sectors that I've mentioned. We also have more on our plate, but I don't want to ruin everything in the first 10 minutes of this webinar. But definitely all what we do in our programming aims at engaging with the several sects and layers of our communities and our society, addressing our national needs, developmental needs, environmental solutions, etc., with, of course, a regional impact and dimension.
Nada, I know a lot of organizations that do cross work between Israelis and Palestinians face a backlash as well for that. I wonder how you guys overcome that, especially among the Palestinian community, who might feel, well, is this normalization? Is this surrendering? So on. Obviously, I know this is not, but I wonder, how do you deal with those questions when you talk to a Palestinian group and you're trying to convince them to work with people of other communities on the Israeli side? How do you get them to agree?
So at first it is really difficult, and of course, whenever now these days the word peace is just like a stigma or a crime that you're condemned for. But when we focused on our discussions with our communities and participants, and also, of course, also with our stakeholders, because also in part of our work is also to engage with some of our governmental institutions, academic institutions, etc. At first, we find it difficult because of the name, the nature of the organization. But then when they come to understand who we are and what we do, it becomes more easier. And what we utilized in our argument is basically what we're doing is not contrary to our, nationalistic and Palestinian, connection to our national cause. We work around, fundamentals that are agreeable, mostly between both sides, the Palestinian society and the Israeli society. Both society are leaning towards a two-state solution. This is what we're doing, and this is what we are calling for through our, engagements and through our work. We call for a Palestinian, of course, independent state on 1967 borders. So in terms of the fundamentals, of course, also of the water rights for the Palestinians, this is at the heart core of our work as an organization. And in that sense, when we focus on the national views and national interests that are not, crossing the lines of the fundamentals of our leadership, of our aspirations as Palestinians, they come to understand that there's nothing fishy about it. But we also focus, as I mentioned, on self-interest. We focus that we want to educate, we want to raise awareness, we want to improve infrastructure, we want to influence policy change, either on the Palestinian side or even on the Israeli side, towards better services for our citizens, towards achieving fair and just allocation for water resources, and towards a healthy environment that is not only for us as Palestinians, but that is actually important for all the people who are, living in this region, that is particularly sensitive to the impacts of climate change, to the lack of to the shortage of water, and to the various, of course, environmental challenges that we're having, which adds up to our conflict.
So, Gideon, I have two questions actually. One is, what are the age groups that you're aiming towards on these projects? And well, let's start with that, and then I'll go to my next question.
So our programming is very comprehensive. The Good Water Neighbors program is working in high schools across the region. In Israel, in fact, we've developed the very first water diplomacy program being taught in high schools anywhere in the world.
Wow.
And it's officially part of the Bagrut, final curriculum program, where kids are learning about their water reality, their neighbors' water reality, and the interdependence between the two. So we have high school kids, we have young professionals, as Nada mentioned earlier. So these can be university students or professionals that have recently started under 35, that have started working in their professional life in ministries, and they come together also to promote a common understanding and common problem solving. The entrepreneurial is also, I would say, a young professional age. And then the other half of our programming is all top down. It's all focused on decision makers. It's focused on the media. It's focused on members of parliament and ministers and so forth, celebrities and opinion makers. So it's a full spectrum, and I think the strength of our work is that we're one organization. We're in fact the only organization that is Palestinian, Jordanian, and Israeli together. So we work, and we have to work it out. It doesn't come automatic. It doesn't come easy. We work out our agenda together, but once we've agreed on the type of vision that we're seeking to promote for any given project, then it's Israelis that lead that education or that program or that advocacy with Israelis, Palestinians with Palestinians, Jordanians with Jordanians. And that's part of the secret to our success, because we're not coming from outside. We're coming from within the community, from within the country, as loyal nationals from our respective communities, coming to speak about critical issues of survival. And then, of course, the three officers, and often led by the three directors, to the international community. Nada, Yana, and myself had this incredible opportunity last year, to travel to New York and to actually present at the UN Security Council. So from high schools to presenting our work at the UN Security Council is an incredibly a diverse platform, and we think our agenda really speaks to that, as Aziz opened up by saying, this truly is interdisciplinary. This truly is dynamic. It can speak to so many publics, because the issues themselves reflect the very basis of our life. If we don't respect nature, then we'll have nothing to really build on in our human societies.
So what do those younger communities, how do they usually react to learning about the other side, or their neighbors? Are they usually surprised by the situation, or is it quite similar between the different communities?
So for the most part, the interaction that happens will be the only time that Israelis will meet Palestinians and Jordanians, or Palestinians and Jordanians meet Israelis. I mean, quite sadly, our young people don't know the other at all, and through the type of work that we did, so one of our earlier programs was building a geological information system, where we would ask the kids to identify hazards around their school. So, and the Israeli school, the kids would take their phone and identify on a GPS the hazard. It could be a waste dump, it could be some sewage, some other environmental issue. They'll photograph it, they'll describe it, and they'll put it on a map. And then the neighboring Palestinian school does the same. And then we put an underlay of shared groundwater or shared surface water. And literally you see the coin drop, because the kids come to see, gosh, what I do is not surprisingly impacting me. But what my neighbor does is also impacting me, and vice versa. And I think that really strongly brings home the message that we're dependent on each other, that our future of living any type of healthy environment requires cooperation, not to become best friends, but to solve practical issues. And in that process of the youth discussing, what they've come to understand, then they come to appreciate the shared sort of common concern, and that enables conversations that expand beyond environment, that become far more human, and see each other as not just Palestinians or Israelis, but residents of the same watershed. And I think that's the barrier. That's the strength of our work. That we're neighbors, and we're always going to be neighbors, and we're going to need to learn how to get on.
So you're mentioning water, and this is for either of you. Water is a very important thing. I've always at least thought a very important thing in the Middle East in general, but definitely for Israel and Palestine and Jordan. I would say maybe Jordan even more, both Israel and Palestine. But recently I've been hearing tour guides sometimes say stuff like, Israel solved its issue with water. We actually now totally fine. We have no problem with water. We desalinate. It's all good for us. So we're not going to have any problem with water. And I'm not sure that's accurate. So I was actually looking forward to this today because I wanted to ask you, so is water taken care of? We don't need to worry about, we figured out desalination, all is good, great, no future conflicts about water is going to happen?
So maybe I'll start with the desal issue, and then Nada can take on to the different water reality that's in Palestine and Jordan. So in the sense that desalination today provides over 70% of the drinking water in Israel, it means that from a domestic water perspective, whenever you turn on the tap in Israel, water is guaranteed to flow. So desalination has been a game changer. But like any technological solution, it should be the solution of last choice and not first choice. Because at the moment, we're burning fossil fuels to create to desalinate marine water and turn it into drinking water. We're adding salinity to the Mediterranean, which also then changes the salinity rates in the Mediterranean with real impacts on biodiversity there too. So from the domestic perspective, Israel does have a level of certainty. In the last 20 years, we've roughly had 15 years of drought in the region. And if desalination wasn't in place in Israel, then you would have seen water shortages and intermittent water supply, as you see in Palestine and Jordan today. That would have happened in Israel too. So from a domestic perspective, desalination is a game changer. At EcoPeace, and I think perhaps what Nada can further expand on, is that we think that it can become the means to help us also solve the water issues regionally. And maybe I'll pass it over to Nada.
Thank you, Gidon. So definitely the water realities are different. And as Gidon mentioned, in Israel, we have seen, we now have a neighbor who's advanced in water technology, in desalination and reuse of treated wastewater for agricultural purposes. And in that sense, also with the technological advancement, the political reality brings Israel to have an upper hand and further control on management of natural water resources at the moment. Despite the fact that in the Oslo Accords 25 years ago, The water issue has been put as one of the 5 final status negotiation topics, along with the most difficult other issues, which are the refugees, the borders of the Palestinian state, and the settlements issue, and of course, Jerusalem. And back then, there was an interim accord for 5 years. During these 5 years, the Palestinians have been given a particular quota of water from the eastern aquifer and from the mountain aquifer, and potentially with an increase of 80 million cubic meters. This brings a total of 200 million cubic meters per year for the Palestinians during the interim accord or a period, which is 5 years. This was 25 years ago. With the population growth and further demand on domestic, of course, use for water, but also for the economic growth since the past 25 years in the several sectors, be it in the agricultural or industrial sectors. The Palestinians are currently suffering from a very difficult water reality, given that their accessibility to the shared water resources are still held hostage to the political conflict and the current Israeli control over the development of new resources, which leaves the Palestinian Authority with one option, which is to purchase desalinated water from Israel at the moment. In many areas in the West Bank, we're seeing acute water scarcity. In average in the West Bank, the per capita share is about 60 to 70 liters per capita per day. And in Gaza, the situation is another story. I will talk about this in a bit. And the quantities are really not relevant and not reflective to the requirements or to the recommendations of the World Health Organization. In that sense, also it leaves many communities, particularly in the south of the West Bank, with receiving water through the network perhaps once or twice over this summer season, and it's heavily intermittent, partly because of the lack of access to resources, but also partly because of the weak infrastructure, mainly in Area C of the West Bank, where the infrastructure is very old and there's a lot of water losses. So this leaves us in this region with two different realities between the Palestinians and Israelis. In Jordan, I wish Yana was here to explain more, but also the most populated areas in Jordan, like Amman and Irbid, are also far away from the resources areas of water, also on purchasing or in having an agreement with Israel on supply of water. What we look at as EcoPeace is not having water particularly as a source of conflict, but due to the recent developments, which Gideon has mentioned, we look at it as an opportunity to actually reconcile in some of the issues, particularly that the manufactured water in Israel would enable Palestinians to receive their water rights from the natural resources with a fair, equitable share, without actually loss on the Israeli side in that sense, in terms of the quantities. And precisely this, we are not here dictating that we should, agree on water and forget about anything else that is also very important for resolving the conflict. But we are saying that water is an opportunity to utilize water as a mechanism for bringing back the people on the table and negotiating and building trust in terms of basically opening back the opportunities for dialogue.
You mentioned Gaza, but didn't go into it. Where does Gaza get its water today, and what can be done? Because I remember reading, again, quite a few articles, sometimes contradictory, and that's the reality we live in today. It's hard sometimes to get the information about Gaza aquifers, the Mediterranean water is getting in them, and that the water there will not be drinkable pretty soon. How accurate is that? What's the reality there? And if that is true, what happens? You get 2 million people with no access to drinking water. I mean, I assume that would be one, horrible for these people, but it's also horrible for the security of the whole region. You get 2 million people who can't drink. That's not good for anyone.
Yes. The Gaza situation is definitely, as you've described and as you have read and as so many people have also read. There was a UNDP report in 2000, I think 2012, something around that, which spoke about Gaza will be unlivable by 2020. This is quite the reality at the moment. Imagine that 97% of the Gaza underground water aquifer, which is the only water, natural water resource underground, which Gaza depends on, is not suitable for human consumption. It's not suitable for also domestic use. If you take a shower in Gaza, you feel like you're taking actually a dip in the sea. It's not only that it is salty because of overpumping from the aquifer to meet the demands of the people, which also causes seawater intrusion into the underground aquifer, and which causes us to become more saline and damaged. But also we are here looking at also high level of nitrates because of pollution with raw sewage due to the inability of the wastewater treatment plants facilities to operate constantly and efficiently because of the lack of energy. For many months, and due to the energy crisis and political crisis, Gaza lives in the dark. The average hours of energy supply range from 3 to 4 to 6 hours. At best, they could reach up to 6 hours or 8 hours. And this, of course, strikes the imbalance in terms, of course, the ability to maintain an appropriate water supply, but also to be able to treat into the sea, and of course it pollutes the beaches in Israel, and also prevents some desalination plants from operating because of the pollution. This is quite the reality at the moment. And despite that, a lot of international community projects and infrastructure projects have been put in place and are being into the planning process to improve the situation. Reversing the situation would be very difficult. Reversing the damage of the aquifer would require stopping some considerable number of wells from pumping, and it will need approximately 30 years to revive the aquifer to its natural original status, where it can be thriving and healthy and enables the communities to utilize it again. So the remaining, of course, also water resources comes from Israel through the Mekrot company, which also the PA purchases from Israel of approximately 10 to 15 million cubic meters per year.
Well, difficult things to hear. I think that you're working towards an important cause. Gidon, we're a tour company, so we thought to talk a bit about the connection between us, Majdi, to EcoPeace. Can you tell us about your tourism work and what is the connection between environmentalism and tourism?
Sure. So we love Majdi tours coming to the region, and I recommend everyone in the audience to come and join a Majdi tour because of its unique perspective of having both a Palestinian and Israeli tour guide together, and having a dual narrative. And we love it when your groups come and look at the reality of the Jordan River. Where generally pilgrims come in order to see the holy waters of the river. The river is holy to half of humanity. Not only to Christians but also to Jews and also to Muslims. Yet people around the world don't realize that the Jordan River south of the Sea of Galilee has become little more than a sewage canal, where most of its waters have been diverted, half by Israel and the other half by Syria and Jordan. And instead of fresh water flowing, have pollution coming from Israeli sources, Jordanian sources, and also Palestinian sources. So the tourism that we're interested in promoting, and that's why we love partnering with Majdi Tours, is a tourism of education, of educational awareness, and of activism, so that you can see the reality on the ground and then bring home that message or what you've seen and what you've experienced back to your community. At EcoPeace, we've developed materials about the importance of the Jordan River to Christianity, to Judaism, to Islam. And we share freely that information, be it to religious leaders or to just people from the community, that then they can utilize and show a video and tell the story, and then use either these books or that we have another booklet that's an interfaith book on the Jordan River, and they could use that to bring not only people of their own faith but people of other faiths to work together to understand the demise of the Jordan, and then to become advocates towards its rehabilitation. And it's really effective. I mean, the US Senate passed a resolution calling for the three sides, the three governments, to work together to rehabilitate the river. And that we had a very senior Undersecretary of State from the US come to see raw sewage flow into the Jordan River. He came with a delegation of about 20 people from the State Department. And this was an American Undersecretary that I think was a deep believing Christian. And he could not believe his eyes that how could the people of the book, how could the three peoples of the region allow this holy river to be so demised? And he played an instrumental role in then having a US president write to the three prime ministers, or the three leaders, a king and a president and a prime minister, that this is unacceptable, and efforts need to be made. And results have happened. we've helped attract about $100 million worth of investments to start getting the sewage out. So the US government under USAID built an important sewage treatment plant on the Jordanian side, the Japanese government on the Palestinian side, and the Israeli government on the Israeli side. And for the first time in 49 years, back in 2014, some fresh water was released again from the Sea of Galilee to the Jordan. And it all happened, because of the local community effort, but combined with that educational tourism, where people were writing to their members of Congress or to their members of the European Parliament if they were coming from Europe. And that's part of what we think is critical to sustainable tourism today. It's not about sitting on the beach. It's not only. I mean, we're not against that. But in addition to having those type of restful holidays, travel is a means to educate yourself and to be involved in making this world a better place. Each one of us that travel have that opportunity. And I think the partnership between EcoPeace and Majdi Tours is a wonderful example of how to bring that together. So we really hope that we're going to be able to have your groups visit us again, so that they can be educated and learn about the situation, and then take those stories home, because when they tell those stories at home, they help make a difference.
It's amazing you mentioning the whole baptism thing, and because we meet with you and then we go to the baptismal site, and then we see people jumping in the water where you can tell it's not a clean water. Like, even without the talk, you should have some doubts because it looks so not clean and it smells so not clean. And our travelers are definitely grateful to have known that, yeah, you might not want to jump in this water right now. And there are other parts earlier in the Jordan River where the water is much cleaner, that people can do that for those who want to get baptized in. But the right thing, as you mentioning, is to actually work on cleaning the water and making sure sewage is not going in, and making sure the flow of the Jordan River comes back to its natural element, and so that sea is also not threatened. But I wanted to actually mention one more thing. We kind of benefited as a company from your work. Is you worked a few years ago on helping a guest house start in Oja, and the last few months before the pandemic, we started working heavily with that guest house and have a booking there almost once a week for a group. And it's been our groups who've stayed there obviously got to see some of your work, got to do a short tour of Oja, which is a spring in the area, and get to learn about the reality there. And we definitely, I think, can see the importance of when things are invested, financially speaking, again, when you bring environmentalism and tourism together, and how it helps the community, how it helps people learn, educational, how it helps the region survive, because finally somebody's actually going there and spending their money there. And that's too often is missed, even among other environmentals I know who works in other regions, who often either you focus on environmentalism or you focus only on tourism. And this idea that we have to work so separate just doesn't make any sense to me.
Absolutely. And that community benefit of the tourists staying in the local communities, the Uja Eco Center. We also have another eco center on the Jordan side in Sheikh Hussein, literally just across the border from Israel, opposite Beit Shan, where we've planted 40,000 trees, and people stay in wood cabins, and they can't believe it. It's in Jordan because the cabins are surrounded in the middle of a forest, and it's just beautiful. And of course, who benefits? It's the local communities that are the staff of the centers. The food is from the local communities, and I think when people stay in these centers, they get to learn about grey water reuse and solar energy and so they also get to experience a far more sustainable tourist development. So, I think it really is comprehensive, as you said in the start, that environment is all about life, and then sustainable tourism is about experiencing that aspect of life when traveling overseas.
Well, we always like to wrap up on a hopeful note. I guess my question to you is, what message do you want our listeners to take with them, and how would you advise them to travel in the future or even get involved with projects like yours?
So definitely, when this pandemic is over, we just encourage everyone to come and experience the Middle East, and to see the possibilities and the opportunities that are there. There's often very negative news from this region, but definitely Majdi Tours and EcoPeace would give you a different kind of experiencing the Middle East and the beauty of the region in all its aspects, in nature, in the culture, in everything, and in the essence of the people and their welcoming. I think that meanwhile, when until we are able to take a plane again, I really encourage everyone to follow us on our different social media and outlets. We've just released and launched our new branding after 26 years, and we're very much excited about our new website and logo and appearance and messaging. Our media team has been really working hard these days. We encourage you to subscribe to our newsletter, spread the word, follow us on whichever webinar or platform you find us, and reach out to us for any questions. For young people who are also interested to become interns and to experience life and work in the Middle East, we are welcoming, of course, those who are enthusiastic about our work to intern in any of our offices. So there's many ways to engage with EcoPeace and to share the experience.
All right, we got actually a couple quick questions I wanted to ask that people sent, and I know Kim said we'll end with this, but we'll try to keep them positive. One is a question about diversity, I guess, animal, wildlife in the region. I'm not sure how much you guys involved in that. And I know since when I was a kid, I remember more wildlife in just even around Jerusalem, and that seems to be decreasing. So what's the reality of wildlife in the region? And the other question, somebody's asking about other organizations doing environmental work in the region. He mentioned Mazen Khumsiya in Beit Jala. If you work with other organizations such as Mazen's, and is there any alliance of these groups that are doing this kind of work?
So the wildlife, like the wildlife globally, is very much threatened and subject to decline. Partly because of the growing populations. In all of our countries, we have some of the highest growth rates in the world, and with the increased populations, there's increased pressure on open spaces, and the forested areas of Jerusalem or around Jerusalem are increasingly under threat, and that of course leads to biodiversity loss. The demise of the Jordan River, one of the first studies we did, is highlighted that we've lost 50% of the biodiversity that used to be in the river and around its banks. I mean, it's a wonderful story, but the first Westerner that actually got on a boat and did the journey from the Sea of Galilee all the way down to the Dead Sea, still left one of the best records of the biodiversity of the Jordan River Valley. And I love to tell the story of his story because he came down with, he was a US admiral, his name was Lynch, and he went down with 4 boats. He lost one of his boats on the rapids, on the waterfalls of the River Jordan. I mean, you know, Nada and I, when we travel down the River Jordan, you don't see a waterfall. If you put a mouse wheel, it hardly wouldn't work. I mean, for most of the journey of the Jordan River, you struggle to see the water. There's so little water there. So yes, the impact on biodiversity, the loss of biodiversity is terrible and unforgivable. And it's a phenomenon, sadly, not just in our part of the world, but globally. As far as, you know, working with other organizations, we work with many organizations, environmental, but even more so non-environmental, because I think, you know, the success of your work is to bring people that aren't like-minded. You know, we already have the environmental knowledge. It's important for us, you know, to be working with very diverse groups, with mayors, with activists from other fields, and bring them on board and educate them on the environmental issues, but also be educated about their issues. And that's the type of interdisciplinary coalition that we feel is far more effective. So, you know, another example, we just recently succeeded, you know, to stop the Siemens company out of Germany to build a new gas power station right on the border between Kfar Saba and Kalkilia. It was designed to be on the Israeli side, but 50 meters from the Green Line. And it would have led to air pollution issues, you know, in Kalkilia and in Kfar Saba. 500,000 Israelis and Palestinians actually came together through a coalition of mayors that we helped establish, Palestinian and Israeli together. And I mean, you know, of course, we weren't the only reason for the stopping and for the closing, but it was an effective part. So if we can create coalitions of Israelis and Palestinians together on real common concern, we can see real results. We can see, you know, the air quality being protected. We can see open spaces being protected, and create the opportunity for a better future for all of our peoples.
That's awesome, and that's definitely a positive note we can with. It's being able to come together to do good things and to stop things that are not good for both of our communities from happening. So thank you so much, Gideon. Thank you, Nada. We both, I think him and I, greatly appreciate the work you are doing, and I'm sure everyone in our network as well. And looking forward to see you both when we can meet again in person and get a cup of coffee together.
Definitely. Thank you, Aziz and Kim. This was a really exciting conversation.
So next week, Kim, what do you think? What should we do?
Right. So Diwali is actually coming up, ceremony of light, which you can see in the picture here. But we decided to talk about India in general, diversity, beauty, and conflicts of India. I think it will be super interesting and definitely colorful.
Yeah, absolutely. I'm also looking forward to that.
That's Gideon's favorite place.
Really?
I am a local there.
So join us, Gideon.
I will. I definitely will. But I can't wait for your groups to come back to the region and come visit.
Same.
Come and see also our work together.
Same here.
Thank you to both.
We usually end with, it's not where we travel, but rather it's how we travel.
Thank you.
Thank you. Bye.
Bye-bye.